Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Carmelo Anthony, George Gervin, George Mikan, Bob Pettit, Kareem. All some of the greatest offensive players of all time. They have got nothing on this man right here. And yes, is Jokic the greatest player of all time, prime for prime? No. Obviously, we have to address the elephant in the room. He's not the greatest all time. Because almost all the guys that I mentioned there, other than Carmelo Anthony, were better on defense. And imagine if Melo doesn't get his number retired because of Jokic. That would be hilarious. But either way, we have to talk about it. But he is the greatest offensive player to ever play the sport of basketball. And I think that that's not a crazy statement to make. I think it's a completely fair statement to make. Because he's that good. He's that good. And also, let's look at the numbers. With Nikola Jokic on the floor, off the floor, the worst offensive rating in the NBA history is 92.2. The Nuggets have an offensive rating of 86.3 with him off the floor. And obviously, you might be saying, "Oh, look at the amount of games he's playing, or the amount of minutes he's playing. It's too small a sample size. He missed a game. There's enough minutes there. It's a decent enough sample size. They cannot score when he's not on the floor." And you might be saying, "Oh, but that's just heliocentric offense and this and that." But I mean, he doesn't dominate the ball nearly as much. He's not there shooting every shot himself. He's just a playmaker. And then, with him on the floor, they have the best offense of all time. I'm not joking. They go from it's a near 40-point difference. It is a 40-point difference. 86.3 to 125.8. It is a 39.5-point difference when he's on and off the floor per 100 possessions. We've never seen anything like that in history. And you might be saying, "Oh, they're a better defensive team with him." Or with him on the floor. They're a better defensive team with him off the floor. Sure. I guess they're a better defensive team with him off the floor. By 6 points. They're 40 points better on offense. The Nuggets go from being, I'm not joking, the worst team in the NBA when he's off the floor to the best team in the NBA when he's on the floor. That is how big of an impact he is. We've even prime LeBron James. And look, prime LeBron, this was how good prime LeBron was. When he left the team, they instantly became the worst team in the league. He left Cleveland, they became the worst team in the league. He left Miami, and they still had Chris Bosh. They still had Dwayne Wade. Mid-season, they got Goran Dragic. Didn't even make the playoffs. And then he leaves Cleveland the next time. They still keep Kevin Love. They got Colin Sexton. They still kept a lot of their players, and they were one of the worst teams in the NBA again. But that's nothing on this man right here. This man right here is the greatest offensive player of all time. We have never seen anything like it. And it's all aspects of offense. It's not, for example, LeBron, where I'm just going to go and run you over. With Nikola Jokic, he can take, he's not the greatest three-point shooter in the world. It's not like he's a terrible three-point shooter for a center, but he's not the greatest three-point shooter in the world. You give him the ball, and he is one of the most effective scorers through four quarters. He's one of the most effective clutch scorers. He's one of the most effective late shot clock scorers. He can fade off his right foot. He can fade off his left foot. He releases the ball from here, so it's extremely difficult to block. He can hit circus shots. He can spin left. He can spin right. He's got good, unbelievable footwork in the post. He's got unbelievable, pump fakes and ability to finish with both hands. He's got a very, very quick first step for somebody inside on post moves for his, he's got unbelievable footwork as far as driving to the basket. He's got elite body control. And as well as that, you can't double team him because he's the best passing big man to ever play the sport of basketball. And look, people are saying, "Oh, what about Arvydas Sabonis?" Look, I'm somebody that will go down saying Arvydas Sabonis in his prime might be one of the 10 greatest players of all time. But that's a might. Nikola Jokic is one of the 10 greatest players of all time. I think you can... The ring debate is going to be one that in 20 years' time isn't going to have as much merit because the NBA is actively trying to stop teams repeating. Like, imagine if after Michael Jordan won his first ring, he had to lose Bill Cartwright and BJ Armstrong. Imagine if he just had to lose them. And then when Rodman came in, imagine if, like, based on the salary cap rule, like, after the first one of the second three-peat, Ron Harper had to leave. So, like, that's realistically the rule set we're playing with in the NBA. So I do think in 20, 30 years, people are going to not necessarily look back on ring counting, because we're not going to be seeing guys winning 6 rings with the same franchises. Because if you win multiple rings with the same franchises by about year 2, if you win 2 in a row, you just physically, because of the second apron, you just can't afford to keep your team together like they could in the 90s. Like, you would have lost those players. Like, the Lakers would have had to, wouldn't have been able to sign Dennis Rodman in today's NBA. It's not the Lakers, sorry, the Bulls. They wouldn't have been able to sign Dennis Rodman. They wouldn't have been able to sign Bill Cartwright. Being like, oh, you know, Bill Cartwright was an all-star who took a lesser role to play with the Chicago Bulls. That doesn't happen nowadays, because he would have been on a $40 million a year contract as an all-star for New York Knicks, and, like, then suddenly you're not going to be able to trade for him. So there's so many things where it's like, we're not going to see the dynasty again. So I think ring counting is kind of dumb when it comes to this, because look what happened after his team won a ring. They had to give up Bruce Brown. They couldn't afford to keep Bruce Brown. And then the next year, they do lose in the playoffs. They then lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So they lose their 2 best role players. But the thing is, with Nikola Jokic as a floor raiser, is he has suddenly turned Christian Brown into a better version of what they are. When he's on the floor, Julian Strawther's a hooper. When he's on the floor, everyone plays better. And, like, even with Jamal Murray stinking it up, when he's on the floor, everybody looks good. When he's off the floor, they all look... I'm not going to say they look bad. They look as what they are. There is nobody in the history of the sport of basketball that has made the players around him look better than Nikola Jokic does. Like, the way people talked about LeBron James making players better, the reality is that LeBron James, the only players he made better were spot-up shooters. Like, that was it. If you were an elite spot-up shooter and you could deal with the bright lights, LeBron James made you look better. That is a fact. And it's like loads of things where it's like, if you were a pick-and-roll big man, Steve Nash in his prime would have made you look better. Like, Amare Stoudemire, as good as he was made look much better because of Steve Nash. And also vice versa. With the way Steve Nash played, you need a good pick-and-roll big man. The thing is with Nikola Jokic is, we saw it at the Olympics. Nikola Jokic made Serbia look like they were as good as the United States. Nikola Jokic got Jamal Murray a max contract because he hit a couple of clutch shots and is a decent second option. Like, Jamal Murray was always one of the weaker second options. Of all teams in the playoffs, he might have been the worst second option. The difference is that he did hit big shots, and Nikola Jokic just didn't allow the double teams. He's not good. Like, you can run your offense through him, you can run your offense to him, and you can run him as a decoy. All 3 of them. The only player you can debate is a better offensive player than him, in my opinion, is Stephen Curry. I think Michael Jordan is the better scorer and is the better defender of the 3 of them, so I'm not going to argue anyone better than Michael Jordan. But I also think that I put more value in the totality of the offense than just scoring. But again, as a pure scorer, Michael Jordan is still in that, like, if you want to argue MJ, cool. I'm not, because he is the best scorer ever. I'm not going to say that he's not. But for me, as far as best offensive players, I go Jokic, I go Curry, I go MJ. Obviously, Michael Jordan's so much better in defense than both of them that he's great in both of them all time, obviously. But, like, who's the greatest offensive player of all time? You can't use rings. You can't use... The only stats you can use are going to back up this man right here. They're going to back up Jokic. If you want to get any stats, it'll back up him. But it's just so impressive what he's doing. And he just cannot be stopped.